My name is Amelia, I am 32 years old, and the night after my family reunion became the darkest turning point of my life. I woke in a guest room, my phone buzzing with alerts. Half asleep, I opened my banking app. My throat went dry. The numbers on the screen blurred, then sharpened again. My savings account showed a balance of less than 1,000. Yesterday, it had been 78,000. I froze, staring at the phone as if the numbers might rearrange themselves, as if a glitch could erase the panic rising in my chest. I closed the app, reopened it, and still the same cruel truth stared back at me. $78,000 had vanished overnight. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped the phone. That money was not just numbers in a bank. It was 14 years of sacrifice. 14 years of double shifts, of saying no to dinners out, of wearing shoes until the soles thinned, of swallowing humiliation while quietly saving every penny. It was the down payment on the small house I had dreamed of, the foundation of the secure life I had built step by painful step. With trembling fingers, I checked the transaction history. Transfer after transfer, all between 2 and 4 in the morning, all authorized from an unknown device. My heart pounded so loudly I thought the walls might echo. The bank confirmed it was no mistake. The transfers had been authenticated with my password, and even my fingerprint. And then came the cruelest blow. When I asked where the largest transfer had gone, the representative answered flatly, "To a Robert Carter." My father. I stumbled to the bathroom, nausea twisting my stomach. My mind replayed every detail of the reunion. The way my mother pressed a glass of wine into my hand, the way my purse had been taken to the living room when I turned my back, the unusually heavy sleep that dragged me under as if I had been drugged. Every sign had been there, and I had ignored it because I wanted so badly to believe we could be a family again. Now the truth hit me harder than any blow. They had staged the entire reunion. The warm questions about my career, the false pride in my achievements, the laughter around the dinner table. It had all been theater. A performance to lower my guard, so they could gut me in the most intimate way possible. I pressed my palms against the sink and forced myself to breathe. The reflection staring back at me was pale, hollow-eyed, a woman who had just watched years of effort vanish in a single night. Anger flared, but it was quickly drowned by something sharper. Betrayal. Not just the loss of money, but the realization that my own parents had engineered this theft. I heard laughter downstairs. My father's booming voice, my mother's delighted response. The sound made bile rise in my throat. They were celebrating while I stood shattered above them, celebrating the theft of my life savings. In that moment, something inside me hardened. The last shred of hope I had clung to, the fragile wish that someday they might change, died in silence. They were not family. They were predators who happened to share my DNA. And from that moment forward, I would treat them as such. I did not storm downstairs. Years of surviving their chaos had taught me one truth. They thrived on emotional outbursts. If I wanted justice, I had to be calm, deliberate, and strategic. But first I had to admit the truth to myself. My parents had not only stolen money, they had stolen my trust. They had stolen the illusion that blood was enough to bind us. That morning, staring at my drained account, I knew with absolute clarity. This was no longer about money. This was about freedom, about boundaries, about refusing to let them write the script of my life any longer. And that was the moment my story truly began. I grew up in a house where money was never stable, but the chaos was constant. My earliest memories are not of bedtime stories or family dinners, but of the clinking sound of coins disappearing into my father's pocket. His name is Robert, and he lived for the thrill of gambling. Slot machines, card tables, sports betting, even underground dogfights in abandoned warehouses if it looked like a wager. He was there. Sometimes he came home glowing, tossing bills across the table like a king returning from conquest. More often, he stumbled in, broke, desperate, and searching the house for anything of value. My mother, Diana, was no better. She wore the mask of responsibility, working as a bank teller, but she enabled him at every turn. "Your father just needs one good win," she would whisper, rifling through drawers in search of change. His luck is about to turn around. Her voice carried faith, but her hands shook with desperation. When I was 6 years old, I had a piggy bank shaped like a ballerina. It sat on my dresser, filled with quarters from lemonade stands and dollar bills I earned, helping neighbors. I loved that piggy bank. It was heavy, solid, proof that my small hands could build something of my own. One night, I woke to the sound of shattering ceramic. My father stood over the broken ballerina, coins spilling from his fist. "Just borrowing this, princess," he said, without even looking at me. "I'll double it by morning." He never did. From then on, my allowance was not a gift. It was a joke. Every time he snatched the $5 meant to last me the week, he laughed and called it a loan from the Mandy Bank. My savings were never safe. Birthday money from my grandmother disappeared. Babysitting cash vanished from my backpack. Even the coins I tucked into socks and hid behind books were eventually discovered. Each theft carried the same false promise. He would pay me back. He never did. By 16, I had learned to play a different game. I hid bills in library books, between the pages of my old journals, anywhere he might overlook. At 17, with my Aunt Lisa's help, I opened a secret account under her name. She was the only adult who saw the truth, the only one who told me I wasn't crazy for protecting myself. At 18, I left that house with exactly $342 to my name. I carried no illusions. I knew what they had stolen from me was more than money. It was trust. It was safety. It was the chance to believe my parents had my best interests at heart. But I also carried a promise, a vow that I would never again depend on anyone who treated me like a resource instead of a daughter. When I look back, I realize my childhood was an education, not in love or stability but in survival. I learned early that those who should protect you can betray you. I learned to save in silence, to fight for scraps of independence, to guard my hope as if it were gold. Those lessons shaped the woman I became. Still, the scars ran deep. Every time I opened a bank account as an adult, I felt a flicker of dread, as if invisible hands might reach in to empty it. Every paycheck I deposited carried a quiet fear that it might vanish. I worked twice as hard as everyone around me, not just to get ahead, but to feel safe. And even when I succeeded, the shadow of my parents' thefts lingered. That is why discovering the missing $78,000 was not only financial devastation, it was a wound ripped open, the proof that the cycle I thought I had escaped was still alive. My parents had trained me from childhood to expect betrayal, and they proved, once again, that they were exactly who I had always feared they were. Before I go further, let me pause and ask you something. Have you ever had to protect yourself from the very people who should have protected you? If you have, share your story in the comments, and if you are finding strength in mine, don't forget to hit subscribe. Together, we create a community where no one has to feel alone in betrayal. By the time I turned 18, I knew staying under my parents' roof would destroy me. Every dollar I saved was at risk, every boundary I set was ignored, and every plea for respect was met with laughter. So I packed a single duffel bag, counted the $342 I had managed to keep hidden, and walked out the front door without looking back. Freedom felt both intoxicating and terrifying. I had no safety net, no family to call for help, no cushion of support. Just my stubborn determination and a tiny amount of cash. The first night in my new city, I rented a corner of a cramped studio apartment that I shared with 4 other girls. We divided the space with sheets hung from the ceiling, pretending it gave us privacy. The bathroom was shared with the entire floor. It was not glamorous, but it was mine. I worked 2 jobs to survive. From 5 in the morning until 2 in the afternoon, I poured coffee and balanced trays as a waitress. After a short bus ride across town, I clocked in as a retail clerk, working until 10 at night. By the time I stumbled into bed, I had barely 4 hours to sleep before starting again. It was exhausting, but every paycheck meant one more step away from dependence. In between shifts, I attended community college classes. I sat in lecture halls fighting to keep my eyes open, scribbling notes while sipping cold coffee. My grades mattered to me more than anything, because they represented a future my parents could not take away. Despite the brutal schedule, I managed a 3.8 GPA. That number felt like armor, proof that I could endure and that I was building something real. The weight of poverty pressed on me constantly. I skipped meals so I could afford textbooks. I wore secondhand clothes until they frayed at the seams. Social invitations became rare because I always said no, unable to justify spending money on things that did not directly lead to survival. There were nights I sat in the dark, too broke to pay for electricity, whispering to myself that this was temporary. That sacrifice now would buy freedom later. My turning point came during my junior year, when I landed a marketing internship. It was unpaid, but I knew I needed experience to escape the cycle of low-wage jobs. I juggled it alongside my shifts, barely sleeping, but it paid off. My supervisor, Vivian, saw something in me that I had trouble seeing in myself. She told me I had a sharp mind, a relentless work ethic, and an eye for strategy. Vivienne became my mentor. She advocated for me, recommended me for a paid position, and eventually wrote the recommendation letter that got me my first entry-level marketing job after graduation. That job was my lifeline. It meant a steady paycheck, health insurance, and the chance to climb toward stability. For the next decade, I advanced step by step. Junior copywriter, content strategist, campaign manager, department lead. Each promotion came slowly, earned through long nights, relentless discipline, and the quiet hunger to prove that I was more than the broken girl my parents had left behind. While colleagues bought new cars and took exotic vacations, I lived in the same modest apartment, drove the same aging sedan, and funneled every spare dollar into savings. By 31, everything finally converged. I was promoted to senior marketing director at one of the largest firms in Seattle. My salary doubled. For the first time in my life, I could breathe without the constant fear of collapse. I checked my account one evening and saw the number 78,000. To anyone else, it might have looked like a financial milestone. To me, it was freedom. That money was not just digits on a screen. It was the down payment for a home, a sanctuary that would belong only to me. It was security, built inch by inch, scar by scar. It was proof that my parents had not broken me, no matter how hard they had tried. But freedom, as I would learn, is fragile. I thought I had escaped their grasp forever. I thought my boundaries were unshakable. Yet the people who had taught me to fear betrayal had one final lesson waiting. Climbing the corporate ladder was not glamorous for me. It was survival disguised as ambition. I knew that every late night and every presentation polished to perfection was more than just career growth. It was my shield against the fear that one wrong move might send me back to where I had started, broke, vulnerable, and dependent. When I first walked into that marketing firm as a junior copywriter, I felt like an imposter. My colleagues carried degrees from prestigious universities. They wore tailored suits and spoke with the confidence of people who had never worried about whether rent would clear. I owned one second-hand blazer that I wore to every important meeting. Inside, my stomach knotted with anxiety. But I forced myself to speak up, to contribute, to prove I belonged. The difference was in my hunger. I was not working for prestige. I was working for freedom. Every campaign I drafted, every idea I pitched, every strategy I defended, carried the weight of my past. Failure was not an option. Failure meant being dragged back into dependence, and I refused to let that happen. Over the years, I built a reputation for resilience. When deadlines loomed, I stayed late. When budgets tightened, I found creative solutions. When clients grew difficult, I learned how to steady my voice and hold firm. Slowly, my colleagues began to notice. So did my supervisors. Promotions came not in leaps, but in deliberate steps. Copywriter to strategist. Strategist to manager. Manager to department lead. At each level, I disciplined myself financially. When my coworkers celebrated promotions with vacations, I stayed home. When they upgraded cars, I kept my old sedan running with duct tape and cheap repairs. While others measured success in visible luxuries, I measured it in savings statements. Every extra dollar went into the quiet empire I was building in my bank account. By the time I reached my 30s, I had developed a life defined by caution. I lived in a modest one-bedroom apartment in Seattle. My furniture was functional, not fashionable. I packed my lunches, brewed my own coffee, and avoided unnecessary expenses. Some people might have called it frugal. I called it survival. I was still that girl guarding her piggy bank, only now the numbers had more zeros. Then, at 31, everything changed. My boss, the same Vivian who had once taken a chance on me, called me into her office. She told me I was being promoted to senior marketing director. My salary would double. I nodded, smiled, and thanked her. Then I excused myself, went to the restroom, and cried silently in a stall. They were not tears of joy, they were tears of release. For the first time in my adult life, I could breathe without calculating which bills I could postpone. With the promotion came a sense of stability I had never known. My savings grew faster, my investments stronger. One evening, I logged into my account and saw the number 78,000. My hands lingered on the screen, my chest swelling with pride. To anyone else, it might have looked like a respectable sum. To me, it was freedom incarnate. That money represented every skipped meal, every sleepless night, every humiliating moment when I had felt less than everyone around me. It was the down payment on a house I had already picked out, a small craftsman home with a front porch where I imagined sipping coffee in peace. For once, I allowed myself to dream, but even as I dreamed, the old unease lingered. My parents still called from time to time, always when they needed money. They had asked for loans under the guise of emergency bills, never repaid them, and guilted me when I refused. I thought my boundaries were strong enough. I thought distance and discipline had protected me. I was wrong. What I did not know was that the people who had stolen my childhood savings had never stopped plotting. They had been waiting, watching. And when I returned home for the family reunion, they saw their chance. The $78,000 sitting in my account was not simply a sum of money. It was my lifeline, my declaration of independence, and the symbol of every battle I had fought since leaving home at 18. I remember staring at that balance on the glowing screen of my laptop, letting the number settle in my chest like a hard-won victory. That amount meant more than digits. It was the down payment for a house, a sanctuary of my own, a place where no one could barge in and take what belonged to me. Every dollar in that account carried a story. The morning I skipped breakfast so I could afford a textbook. The night I stood outside in the rain waiting for the bus after a double shift, shivering but determined to get to class. The countless weekends I declined invitations because I could not justify spending on dinners or movies. My friends joked that I lived like a monk. They did not know the truth. I was building freedom brick by brick, dollar by dollar. I imagined the house often. A small craftsman in a quiet neighborhood, nothing fancy but mine. I pictured coffee steaming on the porch as the morning sun crept over the trees. I pictured shelves filled with books I had bought myself, furniture that no one else had touched, walls painted in colors I chose. A home that would never echo with the sound of shattering piggy banks, or the mocking laughter of a man calling my savings his own. But that dream was fragile. My parents still lurked at the edges of my life. For years I had answered their phone calls when they claimed to need help. Just until payday, they would promise. We only need a little to cover the electric bill. I wanted so badly to believe them, to believe that giving would finally earn their approval. But every loan vanished into the same black hole of gambling and excuses. 3 years ago, they had begged me for $5,000, claiming it was for emergency medical bills. I wired the money, only to discover weeks later that they had taken a trip to Atlantic City. That betrayal burned. It was the day I finally said no more. No more bailouts, no more rescues, no more pretending that enabling them was love. Of course, they did not accept that boundary. They branded me the cold daughter, the selfish one who abandoned her family, the ungrateful child who forgot where she came from. Their voices echoed in my head long after the phone calls stopped, but even with the guilt, I stood firm. Boundaries were the only thing standing between me and destruction. Yet boundaries cannot protect against hope. When the invitation for the family reunion arrived, I almost tossed it straight into the trash. 3 years of near silence had given me peace. Why disturb that? Still, a part of me longed for closure. My therapist, Dr. Winters, suggested that going with strong boundaries might help. You can engage without being vulnerable, she said. Observe rather than participate. I clung to that advice. One weekend, I told myself. One chance to see if the people who had broken me could change. Perhaps time had softened them. Perhaps distance had taught them reflection. Perhaps after everything we could find a thread of connection. That fragile hope was what convinced me to pack my bags and board the plane. I did not know it then, but I was walking straight into a trap. Let me ask you something. If you were in my place, would you have gone? Would you risk reopening wounds for the possibility of healing? Leave me your thoughts in the comments, because I want to know how you would handle it. When I finally drew my line in the sand, I believed it would protect me. That decision came 3 years earlier after the Atlantic City betrayal. I had wired my parents $5,000, thinking I was saving them from medical debt. Days later, a cousin casually mentioned spotting them at a casino, laughing and drinking as if life had never dealt them a hardship. The shame burned hotter than the anger. That was the moment I decided no more. I stopped answering their requests. I ignored the texts, begging for small loans, the late-night voicemails promising repayment that never came. Each time I held firm, their voices grew sharper, their accusations more cutting. You are cold. You forgot where you came from. Everything you have is because of us. Those words sliced deep, but I refused to bend. For the first time, I understood that enabling them was not kindness. It was surrender. The silence that followed was almost peaceful. Phone calls dwindled to nothing. Messages became rare, then non-existent. In the absence of their demands, I learned how much energy I had been giving away. I poured it back into my work, my friendships, and most importantly, into myself. For 3 years, I built my life stronger than ever, convinced that I had finally severed their hold on me. And then the invitation arrived. A thick white envelope with my name scrawled across it. Inside, a cheerful card announcing a family reunion. My first instinct was to laugh. My parents had never cared about family gatherings before. Why now? I almost threw it out, but curiosity gnawed at me. Could this be real? Could they finally want connection rather than control? I carried the invitation to my next therapy session. Dr. Winters studied me carefully as I explained. I want to believe it could be different, I admitted, but I'm scared. She nodded. Boundaries can travel with you, she reminded me. You can attend without offering your trust, go to observe, not to participate. Her words planted a seed of cautious hope. Against my better judgment, I RSVP'd yes. The day I arrived at their house, unease prickled my skin. The shabby bungalow of my childhood had transformed. Fresh siding gleamed in the sun, a wraparound porch stretched across the front, wicker furniture perfectly arranged. Professional landscaping framed the yard. It looked like a magazine photo, not the home of two people who had spent decades pleading poverty. Inside, the changes were even more shocking. Hardwood floors replaced the stained carpet I remembered. Stainless steel appliances sparkled in the kitchen. A 70-inch television dominated the living room wall. My mother fluttered around, dismissing my comments. Your father has been doing handyman work for neighbors, she said lightly. You know how clever he is with repairs. But I knew the truth. Nothing my father built ever lasted. These renovations were expensive, deliberate, and planned. Aunt Lisa hugged me at the door and whispered, "Brace yourself, honey. Everyone is in rare form tonight." Her warning unsettled me, but I tried to smile. Cousins filled the rooms, children raced through the halls, uncles argued about politics. My mother basked in compliments on the catered feast she pretended to have cooked. My father spotted me across the room, his booming voice announcing, "There she is, the big career woman." He draped his arm across my shoulders, parading me from group to group, bragging about my title as senior marketing director. For a moment, I let myself believe. His eyes sparkled with pride. My mother asked questions about my job, my apartment, my friends. They had never cared before. Was this real? Had they finally changed? But then Jacob, my younger brother, pulled me aside. His words hit like a stone. "Mom asked if you were still with that investment broker," he said quietly. "She's been asking a lot about your money." Confusion rippled through me. I had broken up with Patrick 6 months earlier, and I had told her that. Why was she fishing? Why did her questions sound less like curiosity and more like an audit? That night, sitting at the long dinner table with my father at my right hand, I felt something dangerous. Pleasure. The childish joy of being chosen, of being noticed. For a few hours, surrounded by laughter and old photo albums, I believed in family again. I should have known better. The reunion felt like a stage play, and I was the centerpiece of the performance. At first, I let myself fall into the illusion. The cousins who once ignored me now laughed at my stories. The uncles who barely remembered my name asked about my campaigns. My father sat me beside him at the table, raising his glass in a toast to my success. For a few fragile hours, I allowed myself to believe I had finally become the daughter they were proud of. But beneath the smiles, questions kept surfacing, each one with an edge sharp enough to cut through the facade. "How much do marketing directors make these days?" an aunt asked, tilting her head. "Are you planning any big purchases soon?" another relative chimed in. My mother leaned closer, her voice syrupy sweet. "I heard you might be helping Jacob with his student loans. Such a generous sister." The conversation circled back to money again and again, as if my career and my life only mattered in terms of numbers. I told myself not to read too much into it. Families ask clumsy questions, don't they? But the unease coiled tighter in my stomach with every mention of my savings, every casual probe into my financial plans. My father was the most blatant. He bragged loudly about my success to anyone who would listen, but when the conversations grew quieter, his eyes sharpened. "So, what's your nest egg up to now?" he asked, his tone light, but his gaze heavy. Still basking in the attention, I answered too openly. "My advisor shifted assets into some tech startups. It's been a good year." His whistle was long and low. "Smart girl, bet you've got a nice cushion sitting there." Aunt Lisa cut in sharply. "And she worked for every cent of it." Her voice was protective, firm, like a shield thrown over me. I should have listened to her warning. Later that night, cousins pulled out old photo albums. We laughed at awkward childhood pictures, remembering summers at the lake, the sunburns and ice cream cones. My mother held up a photo of 12-year-old me standing proudly beside a blue bicycle. "She was so independent even then," she said, her smile wide. She didn't mention how that same bike vanished 2 weeks later, pawned by my father for cash. My father chuckled, adding, "Independent and smart with money, not like her old dad." Everyone laughed, but my chest tightened. The longer the night stretched, the more the tension grew. My parents' attentiveness felt exaggerated, their pride rehearsed. My mother kept filling my glass with wine, pressing me to relax. My father insisted I leave my purse in the living room, assuring me it was safe. At midnight, exhausted, I excused myself and slipped into the guest room. I tucked my wallet and phone into the drawer by the bed, a habit from years of protecting what was mine. As I drifted to sleep, a fragile hope whispered through me. Maybe I had been wrong to doubt them. Maybe this reunion was real, a step toward healing. Maybe the cycle had finally broken. That hope was a lie. The next morning, the alerts on my phone shattered it. The account drained. The fingerprint authentication. The transfers to my father. Every detail proved the truth I had tried to deny. The reunion had not been about reconnection. It had been a trap. Every laugh, every hug, every toast had been part of a performance designed to make me let my guard down. And I had fallen for it. I have to pause here to ask you something. If you were sitting at that table, hearing those probing questions, watching the smiles that hid sharp edges, would you have trusted them? Or would you have walked away before the morning could destroy you? Share your answer in the comments. I want to know if you would have seen what I missed. The morning after the reunion, reality crashed down on me with the weight of betrayal. My phone buzzed relentlessly, the screen glowing with banking alerts that pulled me from uneasy sleep. At first, I thought it must be some minor glitch, a false notification. But when I opened my banking app, the sight of my balance nearly knocked the breath from my chest. Less than 1,000 remained. Yesterday, it had been 78,000. My fingers shook so violently that I had to set the phone down. I closed the app, reopened it, and saw the same cruel number staring back. My heart pounded as I scrolled through the transaction history, line after line of transfers, each one processed between 2 and 4 in the morning. Each one authorized. Each one draining the life I had built. I called the bank's fraud department immediately. While I paced the tiny guest room, my voice cracked with urgency as I explained the situation. The representative listened, then confirmed the unthinkable. The transfers had been made using my correct password. Even worse, they had been authenticated with my fingerprint. A pause stretched over the line before the representative spoke again. The largest transfer went to a Robert Carter. Is that name familiar? Familiar? My body went cold. Robert Carter was my father. The world tilted. I stumbled to the bathroom, retching violently. My reflection in the mirror showed a pale stranger, eyes wide with disbelief. The night before, I had laughed with my family, clinked glasses with my parents, dared to believe in reconciliation. And while I slept under their roof, they had stolen everything. I searched my purse, desperate for answers. My wallet appeared untouched, but the arrangement of items in the secondary pocket was slightly off. That was where I kept a small notebook with account details. Someone had gone through my things. My mind replayed the evening. My mother insisting on taking my jacket, my purse left in the living room, the heavy, unnatural sleep that dragged me down after a single glass of wine. They had planned this meticulously. A surge of nausea returned as realization spread. The reunion had been a trap. The wine, the probing questions, the exaggerated warmth, it had all been theater. Their affection was not real. It was strategy. Then came the texts. My cousin Ellie thanked me for the new laptop. Uncle Rob said you insisted on helping with my education. Another text followed from Uncle Thomas, thanking me for contributing to the family vacation rental. And then, from my brother Jacob, Mandy, call me as soon as possible. Mom and Dad are buying everyone gifts. Something is wrong. I dialed Jacob immediately, my voice shaking as I told him everything. He cursed under his breath. I knew something was off. Dad told me last week they were expecting a windfall. I thought maybe he had finally gotten a real job. I had no idea it was your money. As we spoke, laughter floated up from downstairs, the clinking of dishes. My parents were celebrating, as if they had earned the money they had stolen. The sound fueled something inside me, anger so sharp it cut through the nausea. For 32 years they had taken. They had drained piggy banks, stolen bikes, borrowed without repaying, and dressed their theft in the language of family. But this was not borrowing. This was not family. This was grand theft, executed under the cover of love. I sat on the edge of the bed, trembling but resolute. For years, I had wrestled with the question of whether blood demanded loyalty. That morning, I finally had my answer. Family is not defined by DNA. Family is defined by protection, by respect, by trust. And my parents had proven, beyond all doubt, that they were not family. They were predators. I wiped the tears from my face, steadied my breathing, and told Jacob the words I had been too afraid to say for years. This ends now. I sat on the bed, gripping my phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. The reality of what had happened tore through me, wave after wave. $78,000 gone. Not just numbers. Not just savings. It was my house fund, my security blanket, my freedom. Every ramen dinner, every double shift, every sleepless night wiped away in a few keystrokes by the people who should have protected me. But the pain went deeper than money. It was the betrayal. My parents had not just stolen from me. They had violated my trust in a way that made my skin crawl. The bank confirmed they had used my fingerprint to authorize the transfers. That meant, while I slept under their roof, they had physically touched me, lifting my hand, pressing my finger to my phone. The thought made me sick. Downstairs, their laughter rang out. Plates clinked, voices hummed with cheer. They were celebrating my destruction as if it were a victory. My stomach twisted at the sound. A new text buzzed on my phone, this time from Ellie, my cousin. Thanks for the amazing gift. Uncle Rob said you insisted on helping with my education. A laptop, bought with my money. Then another from Uncle Thomas. Generous of you to cover half the vacation rental. My chest tightened. They were using me as the excuse for their sudden wealth, painting me as the benefactor while they played Santa Claus with stolen cash. And then Jacob called. His voice was tight with anger. They've been planning this, Mandy. I knew something was wrong. I'm sorry. I should have warned you. His words were both a comfort and a knife. At least I wasn't crazy. At least someone saw the truth. But it confirmed my worst fear. This wasn't spontaneous. This was calculated. My hands trembled as I whispered, "What am I supposed to do?" Jacob hesitated. "Legally, this is theft. But you know them. They'll twist it. They'll say you gave them permission. They'll say you owed them. They'll drag the whole family into it." His words echoed what I already feared. Reporting my own parents meant ripping the family in two. Some would defend them out of loyalty. Others might stay silent. I could already hear the accusations. How could you put your own parents in jail? Over money? But I knew it was more than that. It wasn't about money. It was about boundaries. It was about refusing to let them write the story of my life. I pressed my palms to my face and breathed deeply. For 32 years, they had dictated the terms. They had stolen my childhood savings. They had ridiculed me when I said no. They had manipulated me into loans I knew would never be repaid. And now they had taken the very foundation of my future. Enough. My first instinct was to storm downstairs, to scream, to demand they give it back. But then I remembered all the times I had lost by reacting emotionally. My parents thrived on chaos. They twisted anger into proof that I was the problem. If I wanted justice, I couldn't be impulsive. I had to be strategic. So I began documenting. Screenshots of the transactions, photos of my purse, showing evidence it had been searched, notes of every suspicious question from the night before. Evidence that spoke louder than emotion. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Jacob. "Whatever you do," he said, "don't face them alone." I looked around the room, at the guest bed where I had foolishly believed I could rest, at the walls of the house I had once called home. And I realized he was right. This wasn't just another argument with my parents. This was war. If it were you, if your parents had stolen not just your money but your trust, would you call the police? Would you confront them face to face? Tell me in the comments, because I need to know if you'd have the courage to do what I was about to do. I knew if I walked down those stairs and confronted them in the heat of my rage, I would lose. My parents thrived on chaos. They would turn my screams into proof that I was the ungrateful child, the selfish daughter who cared more about money than blood. No, if I wanted justice, I needed to be calm, methodical, and backed by evidence. The first call I made was to Sarah, a close friend who happened to be a financial crimes attorney. Even though it was early on a Saturday, she picked up immediately. Her voice was sharp, focused. "Do not confront them alone," she warned. "Document everything. Screenshot the transfers, the timestamps, the account numbers. Call the bank again and formally report the fraud. I'll meet you at my office by noon." Her words steadied me. I moved with purpose, photographing every piece of evidence I could. I took screenshots of the drained account, the transfers, the IP address that matched the location of my parents' home. I filmed a video walkthrough of the house, highlighting the expensive renovations that didn't match their supposed poverty. Each image felt like armor. Next, I called Aunt Lisa. She had always been the one adult who saw through their manipulation. When she answered, her voice was heavy with resignation. "I wondered if something like this might happen," she admitted. "Your mother's been hinting about a new car, and I noticed the renovations. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Don't go downstairs. Don't even speak to them." I waited, my ears straining at the sounds of laughter drifting from the kitchen below. My parents were serving breakfast, basking in their false generosity while their daughter sat upstairs shattered. That sound, the clinking of forks, the hum of casual conversation seared into me. They weren't even hiding their triumph. By the time Lisa arrived, I had gathered my essentials into a bag. I slipped quietly out the back door and into her car. The moment I saw her face, strong but sad, the dam inside me broke. I cried in her arms, the weight of years of betrayal crashing through. "They used my fingerprint while I slept," I whispered. "They touched me. They drugged me maybe. They planned every piece of this." Lisa held me tighter. "This is theft, Mandy, plain and simple. The fact that they're your parents doesn't excuse it, it makes it worse." We drove straight to Sarah's office. Michael, a cousin who specialized in financial crime law, was already waiting. For 3 hours, the three of them built a wall of protection around me. Sarah contacted the bank's fraud department, demanding they freeze any remaining funds. Michael drafted paperwork for a police report. Lisa provided testimony about the comments my parents had made regarding my savings. Michael looked me in the eye and said, "This will get ugly. They'll claim you gave them permission. They'll twist it into a story of a daughter who changed her mind. They'll turn family members against you. Are you ready for that?" I thought of the years I had spent letting them define me. The girl whose piggy bank had been smashed, the teenager who hid cash in library books, the woman who had finally saved enough for a home, only to have it ripped away. I wiped my face and answered firmly, "They already stole my money. I won't let them take my future too." Sarah nodded. "Then here's the plan. Step 1. The bank freezes their accounts. Step 2. We file a police report. Step 3. We confront them with legal representation present. We give them one chance to return the money before charges escalate." Hearing it laid out in steps made it real. Made it manageable. This wasn't just emotional chaos anymore. It was a case. A fight with rules. A battle I could win. Before we left the office, I called Dr. Winters, my therapist, and scheduled an emergency session for that afternoon. "You need emotional support as much as legal," she reminded me. "This is a profound betrayal. Do not carry it alone." For the first time that day, I exhaled fully. The weight hadn't lifted, but now I had allies. Now I had a plan. My parents thought they had silenced me with their theft. They thought I would crumble as I had when I was a child. But they had underestimated the woman I had become. This time, I was ready to fight back. That afternoon, I sat across from Dr. Winters in her quiet office, clutching a cup of tea. I was too shaken to drink. My hands trembled as I tried to put words around what had happened. She listened without interruption, her calm presence giving me room to unravel the storm inside me. "It isn't just the money," I whispered. "It's the betrayal. They used my fingerprint while I was unconscious. They laughed downstairs while I was upstairs, losing everything. And I let myself believe they'd changed. That's what hurts the most." She leaned forward, her voice steady. "You did nothing wrong by hoping. The desire for a healthy relationship with parents is deeply human, but what they did was a profound violation. That does not define you. Their actions define them." Her words sank deep. I realized I had been carrying shame, as if their theft somehow reflected my weakness. As if by being tricked, I had proven I was still the vulnerable child they once controlled. But Dr. Winters reminded me I was no longer that child. I was an adult with power, allies, and the right to protect myself. After leaving her office, I returned to Lisa's hotel. Waiting there were Sarah and Michael with a portfolio of documents spread across the table. My parents had stolen my savings, but I had gathered something even more valuable: evidence. Sarah reviewed the bank's responses. "The accounts where your funds were transferred are flagged. Some money has already been spent, but a large portion is frozen. Tomorrow, we serve them with a formal demand letter. If they refuse, we escalate to criminal charges." Michael added, "We've also filed preliminary paperwork with the police. This isn't just a family dispute, it's identity theft and fraud. The law is on your side, but you need to be prepared. They'll fight back." Lisa reached for my hand. "And when they do, you won't be alone." That night, I barely slept. Memories from my childhood flooded back, the piggy bank shattered, the stolen bicycle, the nights I cried myself to sleep after money vanished. It was as if all those years had been building to this moment, the ultimate theft that forced me to confront the truth. My parents had never protected me. They had only ever taken. By morning, our strategy was set. Sarah had drafted the demand letter. Michael had arranged for a sheriff's deputy to accompany us, standing by in case things escalated. Lisa had contacted family members who had witnessed my parents' sudden spending spree, securing their willingness to testify. I packed a small bag filled with every piece of evidence I had. Screenshots of transactions, bank statements proving my years of disciplined saving, text messages where my parents had borrowed money they never repaid. Each document was another stone in the fortress I was building. As we drove toward my parents' house, I stared out the window, my chest tight. Every streetlight and storefront passed in a blur. This was not just about recovering money. It was about reclaiming my life. For 32 years, I had lived in the shadow of their manipulation. Today, I would step into the light. Sarah glanced at me from the driver's seat. "Are you ready?" I took a deep breath. "I've been ready my entire life." We pulled up in front of the house at exactly 10 o'clock. The sheriff's deputy parked discreetly down the street, Michael waiting beside him with the paperwork. Lisa squeezed my hand before we stepped out. My knees trembled, but my resolve was iron. I rang the doorbell. My father opened the door, surprise flickering across his face before he plastered on a practiced smile. "Mandy, we wondered where you disappeared to yesterday. And Lisa, good to see you. Who's your friend?" I looked him straight in the eyes. "This is Sarah, my attorney." His smile faltered, just for a moment. My mother appeared behind him, wiping her hands on a dish towel, her eyes darting nervously between us. The air thickened with tension as we stepped inside. The time for illusions was over. The living room where I had once sprawled on the carpet as a child now felt like a battlefield. The photo albums from 2 nights before were still stacked on the coffee table, but the laughter that had filled this space had turned sour in my memory. My father sank into his new leather recliner, the symbol of the life he had bought with my sacrifice. My mother hovered behind him, her hands twisting the dish towel like she was wringing out guilt. I stood tall, Sarah at my side, Lisa close behind. My voice was steady. "You accessed my financial accounts without permission. You transferred $78,000 into your own names and used it to buy gifts, pay for vacations, and renovate this house. That money was mine. You stole it." My father did not even flinch. Instead, he leaned back, smirking. "It's just money, Mandy. You've got plenty more with that fancy job of yours." His tone was dismissive, as if decades of struggle could be reduced to pocket change. My throat burned, but I refused to let my voice break. "That was my house down payment. Money I saved for 14 years. You didn't borrow it. You took it while I slept under your roof." He waved his hand like I was being dramatic. "We needed it more. Family money belongs to family. You would understand if you weren't so selfish." My mother stepped forward, eyes wide with false innocence. "Honey, we were going to talk to you about it, but you always say no these days. You never help us anymore. We just knew you wouldn't listen." My fists clenched. "Because you never repay what you borrow. This isn't borrowing. This is theft." The mask cracked. My father slammed his hand on the armrest. "We gave you life. Everything you have is because of us. That makes it family money." Before I could respond, Sarah stepped forward, her tone calm but cutting. "Mr. and Mrs. Carter, what you've described is not how the law views parent-child relationships. You have committed identity theft, bank fraud, and grand larceny. Mandy has the evidence. If you do not return the money, we will pursue full legal action." My mother's eyes welled with tears. "How could you bring a lawyer against your own parents? After everything we've done for you?" I stared at her, my voice quiet but sharp. "What exactly have you done for me? Stolen my childhood savings? Pawned the bike I bought myself? Taken thousands in loans you never repaid? Or are you talking about using my fingerprint while I was unconscious?" Her tears dried instantly, replaced by anger. "You've always been dramatic. No one will believe you over us." Lisa stepped forward. "I'll testify. And so will others who heard you bragging about accessing her accounts, Diana. Don't think you can talk your way out of this. I pulled the demand letter from my bag and placed it on the coffee table. You have until tomorrow to return every cent. If you don't, we press charges. My father laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. Go ahead, drag us to court. The family will side with us. You'll be the ungrateful daughter who tried to destroy her parents. And that was when the loud knock shook the front door. The sheriff's deputy entered, Michael close behind with legal documents in hand. The color drained from my father's face as the deputy's voice filled the room. Robert and Diana Carter, I have an emergency order freezing your assets in connection with a fraud investigation. My mother's tears turned real this time, her voice breaking. Mandy, how could you do this to us? We're your parents. I looked at her steadily. Parents don't steal from their children. Parents protect them. The air crackled with silence. For the first time in my life, I felt the power shift. They were no longer the ones in control. I was. And before I continue, let me leave you with this. What would you have done in my place? Would you have walked away quietly, or would you have brought the law to your own parents' doorstep? Think about it, and let me know in the comments. The deputy's presence shattered the performance my parents had been staging. My father jumped to his feet, his face flushing red. This is ridiculous. You can't just barge into my home with your papers and your threats. The deputy held his ground, his voice calm but firm. Actually, sir, I can. These accounts have been flagged for suspicious activity consistent with identity theft. Any remaining funds are now frozen. You are officially under investigation. He handed my father the warrant, the seal of the court gleaming at the top of the page. My mother clutched the dish towel to her chest, her voice trembling. Mandy, please, don't do this. We only wanted what was best for the family. We thought you'd understand. The irony nearly made me laugh. What's best for the family? I shot back. By stealing $78,000 from your daughter while she slept in your house? By pawning off gifts to relatives in my name? By celebrating while I sat upstairs vomiting from the shock of your betrayal? At that moment, the front door opened. Aunt Ruth and Uncle Thomas stepped inside, carrying dishes for the barbecue my parents had planned to host with their new windfall. They froze, staring at the scene. The deputy with his warrant, my father's red face, my mother's tears. Sarah and Lisa standing firm beside me. What's going on here? Ruth asked cautiously. Lisa answered without hesitation. Your brother stole $78,000 from Mandy's account, and now he's facing the consequences. Uncle Thomas turned to my father, disbelief etched across his features. Rob, tell me this isn't true. Tell me you didn't steal from your own daughter. My father's silence was answer enough. The tension in the room rippled outward as more family members began arriving. Word spread quickly. Some defended my parents out of blind loyalty, insisting I was overreacting. Others recoiled in horror, realizing the laptop they'd received, the vacation rental, the sudden generosity it had all been funded with stolen money. Ellie, my cousin, stepped forward tearfully. I'll return the laptop, she whispered, her hands trembling. Jacob arrived soon after, having driven through the night from Portland. The moment he saw me, he walked straight to my side. I believe you, he said simply. That was all I needed. My parents, though, refused to admit guilt. My father snarled, Family doesn't drag family into court. I met his gaze without flinching. You're right. Family doesn't do this to family. You should remember that the next time you think about stealing from me. The deputy explained the legal process that would follow. Frozen assets, formal charges, court dates. My mother oscillated between sobbing and lashing out, accusing me of being cold, selfish, and dramatic. My father barked about betrayal, about how I was destroying the family, but for the first time, their words didn't land. They bounced off the armor of truth and evidence I had built. Around us, the family divided. Some muttered about loyalty, others shook their heads in disgust at my parents. The illusion they had cultivated for years that they were struggling, misunderstood, victims of circumstance crumbled in real time. Their facade of generous parents collapsed under the weight of proof. As I stood there, surrounded by chaos, A strange calm washed over me. This wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about the money anymore. It was about justice. About finally breaking free from the cycle of exploitation that had defined my relationship with them. My father's voice cut through the noise one last time. "This isn't over," he growled. I looked him in the eye. "Yes, it island." And with those words, I stepped outside into the cool morning air, leaving them to face the consequences of their own choices. For the first time in my life, I felt the chains break. The days after that confrontation blurred into a storm of legal proceedings, emotional unraveling, and practical adjustments. Though the deputy's warrant froze my parents' accounts, recovering the stolen funds was not simple. Some of the money had already been spent on renovations, gifts, and vacations. Other portions were tied up in relatives' hands, people who had unknowingly accepted generosity built on my destruction. Michael guided me through the maze. Together, we filed a formal police report, and the prosecutor confirmed charges of identity theft and financial fraud. The words sounded surreal. My parents, the people who had given me life, were now defendants in a criminal case. And yet, instead of guilt, I felt something closer to clarity. Predictably, they fought back. Their defense attorney painted a picture of me as the ambitious daughter who had voluntarily given her struggling parents financial help. They claimed the transfers were gifts. They insisted I had provided my passwords willingly, framing the entire case as a misunderstanding between family. The family itself fractured along deep, painful lines. Some relatives, particularly those who had benefited most from my parents' sudden wealth, stood firmly on their side. Others, who had watched their manipulations for decades, voiced their support for me. Group chats exploded with accusations and insults. "How could you put your own parents through this?" one cousin demanded at the courthouse. "Over money? Is that all family means to you?" I held my ground. "This isn't about money. This is about trust, respect, and boundaries." They violated all three. Still, the toll was heavy. I took emergency leave from work, embarrassed to explain to my boss why I had to step away during a critical campaign. Yet, to my surprise, Vivian, my mentor turned supervisor, was supportive. "Family financial abuse is more common than people realize," she told me. "Take the time you need. Your job will be waiting." Her words were a lifeline in the chaos. Financially, I felt stripped bare. My carefully built house fund was gone. My dreams of buying a home had to be shelved indefinitely. I shifted what remained of my savings into a new bank with stricter security biometric verification that could not be accessed while I slept. Each transaction I made was double-checked, sometimes triple-checked. Paranoia had replaced trust. Emotionally, the scars ran deeper. Sleep eluded me. Night after night, I replayed the moment of discovery, the drained account, the bank representative's voice, the realization that my parents had pressed my fingerprint while I lay unconscious. Migraines plagued me. I lost 12 pounds in 6 weeks. At my lowest point, I called Lisa in tears, whispering that maybe I should let it all go. Maybe I should write it off as the price of finally knowing who they are. Lisa's reply was steady. "You could do that. But Mandy, if you walk away, the cycle never ends. They'll keep taking because they've never been forced to face consequences. If not for yourself, then do it for the part of you that still hopes for justice." Her words struck like lightning. She was right. My parents had spent my entire life stealing from me without repercussion. Every piggy bank, every bicycle, every loan that was never repaid. This was not just about $78,000. It was about breaking a pattern that had defined too much of my life. So I recommitted. Court hearings dragged on, each one exhausting. Some family members glared at me across the aisle, whispering that I was heartless. Others approached quietly afterward, admitting they'd always known something was wrong but had been too afraid to speak. Small victories began to add up. The bank restored $34,000 traced directly to frozen accounts. Cousins returned laptops and jewelry. Even Ellie, tearful and ashamed, offered back her gift. Through it all, Jacob remained by my side, struggling with his own complicated emotions. He confessed late one night. I keep thinking about Dad teaching me to ride a bike. About Mom making soup when I was sick. Were those moments real, or just manipulation? I told him the truth I had learned in therapy. Both can be true. They can love us in moments, and still treat us terribly. We can remember the good, without excusing the bad. And for the first time in years, I saw hope flicker in his eyes. By the time the trial date finally arrived, nearly a year had passed since the night I discovered my savings drained. That year had been marked by endless hearings, sleepless nights, and the slow, agonizing work of piecing myself back together. But as I stood in the courtroom, I realized something profound. I was no longer afraid. My parents had chosen to accept a plea deal rather than face a full trial. They admitted to lesser charges of unauthorized access and financial exploitation. The judge sentenced them to 3 years of probation, mandatory financial counseling, and 200 hours of community service. Most importantly, the court ordered full restitution $84,620, including interest. When the gavel struck, the sound echoed like a door closing. My parents shifted uncomfortably at the defendant's table. My father's jaw was tight, his eyes hard with resentment. My mother wept, but even in her tears, I heard manipulation. After court, she approached me, mascara streaking down her face. "We only wanted what was best for the family," she pleaded. "Someday you'll understand what it means to sacrifice for people you love." I looked at her steadily, my voice quiet but unshakable. "I already understand sacrifice. I sacrificed my childhood savings, I sacrificed years of peace, and now I've sacrificed the fantasy of having parents who care about me. That ends today." My father said nothing. His silence was heavier than her words. His eyes, so much like mine, carried no regret, only bitterness. That silence told me everything. Walking out of the courthouse, I felt something break loose inside me. For years, I had carried chains forged from guilt, obligation, and the desperate hope that blood might equal loyalty. Now, those chains lay shattered behind me. The law had recognized the truth I had known all along. What they did was theft, not parenting. But healing wasn't instant. Social media buzzed with my mother's posts, painting me as the cold daughter who destroyed her parents. Relatives whispered that I would regret this when my parents were gone. "They won't be here forever," some cautioned. "You'll wish you made peace." What they didn't understand was that I had made peace not with my parents, but with myself. Dr. Winters helped me see the difference between forgiveness and reconciliation. Forgiveness, she explained, was something I did for my own heart, to release the poison of anger. Reconciliation required remorse and change from the other side. My parents had shown neither. They had written apology letters only because the court ordered them to, each one filled with excuses and subtle blame. They hadn't earned reconciliation. So, I chose something different. I chose to build my own definition of family. With Lisa, who stood by me through every hearing. With Jacob, who had processed his own pain and now stood stronger than ever. With friends who showed up not out of obligation, but out of love. I celebrated my 34th birthday surrounded by people who didn't measure my worth in dollars, but in presence, laughter, and respect. I eventually bought the house I had dreamed of. A small craftsman with a porch where I sip coffee in the mornings. Every wall, every floorboard feels sacred, because I know it was built from my perseverance, not stolen shortcuts. It is the sanctuary I once thought money alone could buy, but now I know it was also earned through courage and boundaries. And that is the lesson I want to leave you with. Blood may tie us together, but it does not define family. Family is the people who protect you, respect you, and celebrate your independence, not those who drain it for their own gain. If this story has struck something in you, if you've ever had to draw boundaries with the people closest to you, then share your own experience in the comments. And don't forget subscribe to hear more stories like this. Because sometimes the most important battles are the ones we fight to reclaim our worth. The storm eventually passed, though its echoes will always linger in me. Looking back now, I see not just the theft of $78,000, but the theft of illusions I had carried for too long. For years, I believed that if I worked hard enough, if I forgave enough, if I gave enough, my parents might finally become the people I needed them to be. Their betrayal forced me to release that fantasy. What I found in its place was something far stronger: peace. Not the peace of denial or pretending things were fine, but the peace that comes when you accept reality and build something better for yourself. In cutting ties, I made room for relationships that are authentic. Lisa and I have made Sunday brunch a tradition. Jacob and I are closer than we've ever been, building not just siblinghood but friendship. My colleagues turned into my chosen family, people who cheer for my victories without envy and stand by me through setbacks without judgment. In my small craftsman home, I feel a kind of safety I never knew as a child. Each morning, I brew coffee, sit on the porch, and remind myself that this life is mine, not borrowed, not stolen, not bargained away. It belongs to me because I fought for it, and perhaps the most unexpected gift has been the ability to help others. By sharing my story, I've met people who saw their own lives reflected in mine. Survivors of financial abuse, children of manipulative parents, men and women who thought they were alone in their pain. Together, we remind each other that family is not about blood, family is about choice. So if you carry scars like mine, know this: you are not defined by betrayal, you are defined by the strength it took to survive. And when you choose to honor your worth, to build boundaries, to create your own circle of trust, you reclaim everything that was ever stolen from you. That, to me, is the true ending. Not the restitution, not the court sentence, but the quiet certainty that I am free.